Did you know that before the invention of the light bulb, the average person slept for 11 hours a night? 11 hours. The average now is more like 7.5. It's not surprising, is it, that we are busy and we are tired. Even in the middle of a lockdown caused by a pandemic, how many of us still manage to find ourselves rushing around? It was illegal for us to rush from one place to another, and so instead we were rushing from phone calls to Zoom calls, from Netflix to Disney Plus. We were rushing in that sense of the kind of constant low-level busyness of social media and notifications always going off. Are you tired? Are you weary? It's really profound, I think, then, that when Jesus invited people to come to him in Matthew chapter 11, he said this: "Come to me, all who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Do you need rest today? Are you weary? Are you burdened? Are you tired? Tired on a level that goes beyond just like being physically tired, beyond being mentally fatigued, but is a kind of soul deep exhaustion. Jesus says, "Come to me." And instead of that kind of exhaustion, he offers a life that is defined by joy and by love and by peace. But that actually gives us a problem, doesn't it? Because if Jesus says that the life of a Christian is one that is defined by joy and love and peace, what Jesus says and the observed reality that most of us see in others and experience in ourselves doesn't seem to match up with what Jesus offers us. I think the most common answer I get to the question, "How are you?" from anyone, whether they're Christian or not, is some variation of busy. Now, there's undoubtedly a good kind of busyness and a bad kind of busyness. There are things that are good for us to be doing with ourselves, and there is a way of busyness that is not so good. But when you look at the life of Jesus, when you read the accounts of his life, do you see somebody who is busy and rushed, weary and tired, the same way that most of us are? Is your soul weary? If it is, then be blessed this morning by the words of Psalm 23.
Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
The book of Psalms is this piece of ancient Hebrew literature, a book full of poems that talk about what real life is like and what it's like to navigate real life when you have your faith in a God who is above and beyond all of it. Songs that talk about the experiences that you and I have. And this, Psalm 23, I've called the Song of Rest, speaks into the reality of a busy world and what it's like to live in that busy world, knowing God in the midst of all of it. A God who would make us lie down. a God who has the power to restore our souls. Here's my big idea this morning, is that Psalm 23 makes us ask 3 questions of ourselves. The first question it makes us ask is, how are you? Could the answer to that question ever be anything other than busy and tired? Now, it might be that as you hear me say that, you think I am being woefully unrealistic. You're sitting there thinking, Dave, you have no idea what it's like to be a working mum and have as many people depending on me as I do. And do you know what? You're right. I don't know what that's like. Or maybe you're sitting there and thinking, Dave, I really don't think you understand what it's like to be in a competitive corporate workplace like mine and the demands that it puts on me. And you know, you're probably right. I probably don't really understand what that's like. Or you could be sitting there thinking, Dave, you do not know what it's like for in my context or for my generation or what my home is like. And all of those things could be true. But even if that's the case, can I implore you to please just hear me out this morning? Because I think the stakes are higher than we might imagine. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus tells a well-known story of what the kingdom of God is like. The story of the parable of the sower. He says how the kingdom of God is like a man sowing seed. And some of the seed falls on various different kinds of soil. And one of the kinds of soil that some of the seed falls upon is soil that has got thorns in it. At first, the seed grows, but then as it starts growing, it gets choked by the thorns that were in the soil. Afterwards, Jesus is explaining what he was talking about. And he says, the seed that is sown amongst the thorns, this is the one who hears the word of God. But the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word. The cares of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the world. It is quite possible that more Christians have been killed by busyness than by bullets. We need the restored soul that Psalm 23 is offering us. It is a deep need and we cannot gloss over it. The stakes are high. Augustine put it like this when he said, "You have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you." Proverbs 18 verse 14 puts it like this, "A man's spirit will endure sickness, but a broken spirit who can bear?" You see, the great news of Psalm 23 is that is exactly what God is offering us. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Jesus can restore your soul. But did you see how surprisingly forceful his language was? He makes us lie down in green pastures. He leads us beside still waters. Why? Why is the language that strong? It's because on our own, left to our own devices, human beings will kill ourselves. We need leading to green pastures and to still waters. And in John chapter 10, Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd." The Lord of Psalm 23 is Jesus Christ, and he offers us a shepherd who will take us to green pastures, to still waters, who can restore our tired and weary souls. But that leads us on to the second question that I think Psalm 23 poses to all of us. Who is your shepherd? You see, this psalm doesn't just say that God offers us still waters, green pastures, a restored soul. It also describes what it's like to live with our good shepherd. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. A path and a valley. You see, the reason it talks about a path and a valley is because a path is narrower than a valley. And this path, the path of righteousness, the path of following Jesus, goes through the valley. The way of Jesus is not easy. It goes through a valley. But a valley is wider than a path, so it means that even when you're living a life that is not easy, even when you are bombarded with busyness and chaos, when you feel like you are spiritually, physically, and mentally drowning, it is possible to be following the Good Shepherd, or it is possible to be straying from his path. Isn't this the real world? Isn't this why the book of Psalms is so filled with real songs? Haven't we all been there? We've been through valleys and know that at times we have felt like we're following in the steps of our Good Shepherd, and we've been through valleys and known at times that we've not been following him. But the way to a restored soul, the way to green pastures, the way to still waters is a long, slow walk through a valley following Jesus. And I think that's probably not what lots of us want to hear this morning. Do you want a 3-minute summary of this talk? If you do, can I suggest you probably don't actually want to hear this talk at all. But if you're weary, if you're tired, if you're worn out, if you have been broken by the way things are and you cannot go on, if you have this nagging suspicion that the metrics of success that the world we live in is giving us are slightly out of kilter, or maybe massively out of kilter, if you are restless, what Psalm 23 offers is a countercultural and counterintuitive journey to a restored soul. But Psalm 23 is not for you if what you want more than anything is just a really easy life. And in fact, I think subtly, Psalm 23 shows us that the pursuit of a really easy life is actually what's making so many of us so restless, so exhausted. Because if in fact the path of righteousness, of following Jesus, the path to a restored soul is a path through a valley, following him, then if our lives are a pursuit of an easy life, then it is like sheep following the shepherd through the valley, but looking at the high ground on either side of the valley and deciding they would rather be there. And so in an attempt to get there, abandoning following the shepherd and instead smacking their heads over and over again against the sheer cliff walls of the valley either side of them. Who is your shepherd? The first 5 words of this psalm tell us who they should be. The Lord is my shepherd. And that means that I am not my shepherd. And my attempts to make me my own shepherd have led to restlessness, have led to weariness, have led to exhaustion. I need a good shepherd. I think we all do. It might be that you feel like the question, who is your shepherd, is just too abstract. It's too like, what am I even talking about? But let me ask a more personal and maybe sensitive question then. Is your hope of rest in something that you can achieve? Do you feel like you will have rest, peace, and restoration when you get that job that you have been dreaming of and working towards? Or when you live in the kind of house that you have long hoped you would? Or when you've achieved certain life goals? or when your finances are set up in a certain way, or when your kids are kind of established to a certain extent, or when you start your retirement, or X or Y or Z. The list could go on and on and on. Stop. Only the Good Shepherd can restore your soul. And after Jesus said, I am the Good Shepherd, he then immediately said, the Good Shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. That is why the pursuit of none of those other things will ever give us a restored soul, is because nothing else will do that for you. Your career, your family, your finances, your retirement, your life goals, none of them will lay down their life for your sin. But Jesus did. He is our Good Shepherd, and he offers to restore our soul. Where do you have to get to get to a point where you go, something has to change? At what point do you go, the status quo isn't working? I need what Psalm 23 is offering me. Look, it may be that you've listened to me for the last 15, 20 minutes, and where you are right now is just carnage. I know that could be the case because for plenty of the last few weeks, that's been the case what my house is like on a Sunday morning when I'm trying to be at church. And if that's the case, if it is absolute carnage where you are right now, probably this message isn't going to get through, is it? It's probably like somebody trying to whisper something really meaningful in your ear quietly when you're at a pendulum gig, and there is just no chance of it breaking through the noise. If that's the case, feel free to tune me into the background of what is going on right now and deal with some of the carnage around you. But if you do, can you promise me this? When peace descends, when there is a moment of calm at least, please read Psalm 23 and then breathe and be blessed. And then read Psalm 23 again and breathe and be blessed. The final question I think this psalm is asking us then is, where do you live? Where is your home? The final two verses of the psalm say, you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What is your place of permanent residence? You see, the way most of us live our lives today, we have trained our own muscle memory that the way to get restoration is as a short-term thing after living through something that's exhausting. Life is exhausting, and so every so often we go on holiday for restoration. Life is stressful, so every so often we sit down and put the kettle on. Life, a day is exhausting, and so at the end of it we collapse into our bed. But for a restored soul, it's not a temporal thing. It's not a momentary thing. This psalm doesn't invite us to exhaust yourself and collapse at the end of the day. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. For what it's worth, though, you still can collapse on God like that. If you have been utterly broken and bruised by life, you can collapse on God and know that you're collapsing into the arms of somebody who will care for you. A bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly smouldering wick he will not snuff out, said Isaiah. If you are exhausted and need to collapse into God's arms, he will take you. But he wants to be your good shepherd. He wants to lead you in paths of righteousness. He wants you to be able to say, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. He wants you to be able to take up permanent residence with him for a restored soul. What does permanent residence mean? Well, it doesn't mean just kind of being at church 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The Psalms are poetry. They always have more meaning than just what's written on the surface. What I think I mean is that permanent residence is about saying your heart and your soul and your mind are in a place of permanent residence in the house of the Lord. And that means that you can do so many of the things that you would have done in the world anyway, but whereas before they would have worn down your soul, now they don't have that effect on you, because your peace, your restoration, your fields, your still waters, you're not looking for them to give you that. So your career no longer has the power to devour your soul, because you're not asking for it to restore your soul. Your family no longer has the power to destroy your soul, because you're not asking it to restore your soul. Your retirement, your life goals, the list goes on. None of those things any longer have the ability to destroy your soul, because your soul is restored by its permanent presence in the house of the Lord. And your heart and your soul and your mind dwell there always. Where do you live? That's the question I want us to leave us with this morning. Is the house of the Lord a place that you're passing through? Is it like you're on a really long train journey and you've got to change trains at one station? And so you get off one train and you appreciate the chance to stretch your legs between one section of your journey and the other. But really, you're just passing through. Just passing through? Where do you live? Or maybe you're here for a while. Maybe it's like a holiday. After life has worn down your soul, you take a holiday with God, but you know you're only here temporarily and you will return to being worn down. Or maybe you're like a university student who lives half the year in one place and half the year in another. And half the time you're in a place of soul restored goodness of following Jesus. And half the time your soul is being battered and worn down by the world. Or do you want to take up permanent residence in the house of the Lord by following Jesus, our good shepherd? Are you tired? Are you weary? Is your soul exhausted? Be blessed this morning by Psalm 23. The Lord is your shepherd. You shall not want. He makes you lie down in green pastures. He leads you beside still waters. He restores your soul. He leads you in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you should fear no evil, for the Lord is with you. His rod and his staff, they comfort you. He prepares a table for you in the presence of your enemy. He anoints your head with oil. Your cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. You can dwell in the house of the Lord forever.